Hey everybody, Brendan here. Welcome back to another tournament game of mine. This is the second tournament of my second tournament back after my long hiatus from tournament chess. That's a lot of saying tournament. Let's jump into the game. I am playing with the white pieces against Arya, and this was a pretty interesting game as well, similar to the last one in some ways with just the theme of attacking. But let's get into it. We see e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, a6, knight to c3, and bishop to c5 here. So I played the move knight to b3 to attack the bishop, and now the bishop has to retreat somewhere they might not want to, or maybe they do want to play something like bishop to a7 here. But my opponent made what I think is an actual mistake here. They played the move bishop to b4. And after this, I think black is already significantly worse after my next move, which is queen to d4 here. Either they have to give up the bishop, which they end up doing, which is not a good move, or they have to, which is the best computer move, play bishop to f8, which is something that nobody wants to play because, yeah. So unfortunately, the opening started off pretty badly for my opponent, but they took on c3 because they didn't want to play bishop f8. Nobody wants to play bishop f8. And just to mention here, knight c6, we take on g7. And I'd say we're pretty happy here. So took on c3, took on c3, and then knight f6. So I played e5. This was double-purposed. First off, to attack the knight that developed, but also to get the d6 square. Because after we get the d6 square, let's just say we get our knight randomly there somehow, the game's over immediately. Just because it's in these Con Sicilians, especially since they don't have a dark square bishop, if we get a knight there, yeah, game over. So they played knight d5. And I had an idea in mind here with e5, knight d5. Obviously, they do get a tempo against my queen, and they did bring their knight to the center, which is nice. But this move, queen to g3, causes some problems for our opponent. Because now, what the idea is I'm threatening the pawn on g7, but I'm also going to play c4 next. And then I can continue my development like bishop d3 or something like that, where the knight gets kicked around again, which is something that I'm happy to see. The other thing that's also good about the queen on g3 specifically is if d5 and I take en passant, they can't take back with the queen because our queen defends that square through an x-ray. So my opponent played king f8. I played c4. We see knight e7 and then bishop to d3. So if ever knight f5, I'm just going to snap that off immediately. So let's just say knight f5 here. Takes. Something like bishop f4 looks great. Also the move bishop to e3 looks really good too. And the whole point is, again, I'm just trying to go for some sort of dark square domination here, where if they play like b6, then I don't worry. I just play like rook d1, rook d6, I castle. This is lost already. Just a sample variation though. They played knight bc6, developing a piece, which is very natural. I played bishop to e3, and I know exactly where I want this piece to go. I was thinking bishop c5 and bishop d6. And again, if ever knight f5. So let's just say they play rook b8 here. If they ever try something like knight f5, even though they can't yet because it's pinned, I'll just take the piece, and my bishop is still there, causing a lot of havoc. So that's like a dream scenario. But of course, they prevented bishop c5 by playing b6. Here I played rook d1. So if they ever try any d5 again, I take en passant. I'm not worried about that. And as we can see, a lot of my pieces are extremely well placed here. My opponent played bishop to b7, and then I played f4. And I had an idea in mind here. So d5, I would consider taking en passant. And I noticed that I had discoveries in this position, like bishop takes h7, for example, because their queen is attacked. And I didn't have to worry as much about queen b4, bishop d2. Like I'm not losing a piece. But this is something that I was actually kicking myself over in the game because I wasn't sure exactly how the evaluation of this would go. But yeah, that's just one of the lines that I was considering. This is about 2 months ago after recording. No, maybe more than that. I think this was in May, so it might have been like 4 months or 5 months since I played this game. But instead, my opponent played knight b4, which opens up their bishop and also attacks my bishop. I was more than happy to play bishop to b1 here to defend my a pawn and also keep my bishop pair. Because obviously, one thing I want to mention here is if takes, knight f5, I feel like you're just... This is probably still really good, but why are we allowing our opponent the chance to get out here? Where all of a sudden, yeah, we have the d6 square, but this, like, I don't know. This feels a little off to me. But at the same time, the more I look at this, I'm pretty happy. Like, if I can... Obviously, bishop takes g2 is something to be annoyed about, especially followed by queen h4. So there's like some specific tactical complications. But if you can just like transport this knight to d6, then easy win. There's just too much hanging at that point. But of course, the thing I just mentioned with queen h4, so maybe rook takes has to be played, followed by some sort of d5. But again, I'm getting caught in the complications there. Just one thing to point out is that bishop b1 was the first choice, because again, if knight f5 ever comes here, bishop takes, pawn takes, this just looks really bad. The d pawn it feels even weaker somehow, even though this e pawn wasn't protecting it. D5 feels harder to play. I think that's why intuitively it feels harder here, and everything's going our way. We can play a3, knight c2, king f2 takes, and then like something maybe like queen takes looks pretty good, or even king takes, surprisingly. I don't see anything wrong with this either. b5, we meet with c5. Just a lot of nothings is essentially what I'm doing here, but I just wanted to show just some sample variations of if our opponent is playing really badly, because they'd have to play really badly to get to this specific part. But yeah, so bishop b1, that's just a sample variation of why I want my bishop. Here, they played queen c7, and I decided to actually defend my pawn. I don't think I even need to, though. After castles and then rook takes, I can take on d7, I can bring this rook over to c1, and then the other rook over to d1, and they just keep getting kicked around like crazy, and this would offer more than enough activity for the pawn. And opening the position when their king's on f8 is definitely beneficial for us. Also, we can take on b6. So instead, I played rook c1. They played knight f5. I took it really fast. Takes, and then I castle. So I decide to give up this pawn instead, which I don't really know if that's anything better, honestly. But that was kind of the plan here. And I think I was going for something like rook a1 or rook d7. Where after queen takes c4, I would consider taking on d7. Because queen takes b3, there's bishop c5 check, winning the queen. At least that's just a passing glimpse of what I think I was considering there. But my opponent played knight d3 instead. I played rook c2. They played bishop e4, and I played rook d2. And I was really hoping that they would fall for a type of variation, which we'll see in a moment. And they actually did. So rook b8, I played rook d1, and I was really hoping they would take on c4, which I think is a mistake. And they did. It's pretty bad regardless. I think maybe knight c5, though, could be interesting, or like bishop. I don't know. I can't really suggest anything because this all looks bad. But queen takes c4 just goes into a really good variation for me with the move rook takes d3. And unfortunately, there's not really anything they can do here. I get 2 pieces for a rook. And by the way, this is their rook for the 2 pieces, by the way. These 2 pieces are the same as this rook. What's better? I think it's pretty easy to guess which one is better of the 2. So they took, and I took back, which I think is what they were missing, because if queen takes d3, there's bishop c5 check, and we get the queen. So if something like takes, then takes. Of course, we do have a knight, extra knight here, because the two rooks versus the queen is roughly equal material. They do have a few pawns for it, but these pawns are so weak, they're going to drop. So they didn't take back because that would be a bit silly here. Instead, they played g6, and then I played bishop d4. Because they wanted to play king g7, so I just prevent it. Because if they play king g7 here, they have to watch out for moves like e6 every move now. And this is definitely not pleasant to see. Because if they play f6, and I take on d7 here, things have clearly gone wrong, where I have now a pawn on the 7th rank as well. So they didn't play king g7, they played queen e6. I played bishop to c3, and then they played king g7. So white to move here. There's a lot of moves, honestly, but I was pretty happy with my move. There's rook d6, which I think I also could have perfectly played. Like, this is a perfect move as well. I played knight d4, which I thought was kind of cute. The whole idea is that they move. They ended up taking on a2, but now I can take on f5 with check. And I'm removing more defense of their king here. They played king f8, and then I played knight to e3 with ideas of some sort of f5, maybe some bishop b4. And again, all my pieces are pretty well coordinated. The other idea is maybe I'm going to remaneuver either to d5 or to g4, and the f6 square is extremely weak. We see rook g8. I play knight d5, going for f6. They played g5, and I played knight to f6. I could have also considered f5 here, but I didn't really want to play it, just because I thought knight f6 was even stronger. Whole point is if they take, then we can just take on g8 here, and this is just completely winning. But instead, they played rook g6, and again, I could have considered a move like f5. This is completely winning. But I just went for knight takes d7 because it's a fork, winning the rook on b8 here. I just go for it. G takes f4, queen to f3, very safe move, and my opponent resigned. The whole point of queen f3 here obviously is because if I play another move, if I'm a little bit sillier, like queen f2, queen b1, I might have problems with the rook. Luckily I don't. Even in these variations where I'm trying to mess up, there's still queen f1. But queen f3 is just super uber safe because we always have rook d1 in these positions to block the checks, and everything is still defended. The knight's coming back into the game to f6. There's still mating threats. The game's over. So that was game number 2. I thought it was an interesting one because it highlighted the issue of dark squares or color complex weaknesses, and how I was able to get the dark square bishop really early on, and because of that, I ended up just winning the game. So that's it for this game, and I will see you in round number 3. I'm 2 out of 2 on this tournament, which is awesome. So can I go 3 out of 3? We'll find out. Bye-bye.